let's get underway as we are already in-game ready to begin with Viper versus the Muslim. That's right, folks. Here on our side, we're going to have two of the tippity top, in fact, players playing out against each other. For those wondering, at the time of recording, Viper is currently in 24th on the leaderboards after cracking through the 1800 elo rating barrier. The Muslim a little bit behind him at 1787, but this is impressive. The Muslim just a day ago was down in about 80th place, is currently now up to 30th. So he is rising fast like an eternal flame. And he's going to be doing it on the opposites, up against the Delhi. That's the other part. I looked, I was like, we should probably do this game. This will be a good one to open up on, right? It's not only that it's going to be another Delhi versus Abbasids, which we've been seeing more of. For those that are unfamiliar, in a lot of the matchups, we've been seeing Abbasids actually are surprisingly a good counter against the things Delhi do. But we'll get into more of that in a moment. Because the other reason I want to say I wanted to do this map is because it's on Altai, a map that I actually haven't seen too many Abbasid plays come out and play on, especially with the risk of being up against the top civs, right? The likes of like the Mongols, the Rus, etc. And then on the other side, especially Delhi, I feel Delhi is another one that we don't really see here. Altai is not exactly a map that is renowned for its powerful invoking of the Delhi side, right? Usually, if you're thinking about Delhi, you're thinking about how they are going to actually stomp a game. You're thinking about probably Mongolian Heights, possibly Danube River. You're definitely thinking about Confluence, but you're not really thinking about a waterless map where there's not really great choke points. And here's what I'm talking about with choke points, by the way. Yes, I am aware there's a lot of kind of terrain that blocks you, obstructs you, forces you around it. And we've talked before in lengths on Altai about how that can actually really influence the crawl effect of taking control of certain grounds and then force your opponents into a very uncomfortable situation quickly. It's why a race towards the center is always popular here. But on this map, the choke points aren't naturally beneficial to the Delhi. Delhi players typically want to have a single confined choke point or a centralized attention upon an area that can act as a pseudo choke point, right? So think King of the Hill. Not only does it have semi-choke points going up the hill, it's the fact that all attention gets drawn towards a center sacred site, right? Whereas when we look on this map, you've got one in the south, one in the center, and one in the north, and it becomes very frustrating to try and lock all of those down as a Delhi player due to the immobility of the nature of your strategy, right? Because the strategy that we've seen a lot of Delhi players engage with at the moment is the compound of the defender. Right? Compound of the Defender is just kind of the go-to source right now on land. Honed Blades used to be amazing, but ever since the nerfs to it, specifically as in conjunction with the buggy research speed taking about 15 minutes on average to research, House of Learning no longer is an option when you crack Castle Age. And instead, I think a lot of Delhi players have identified that once you crack Castle Age with Compound of the Defenders, it's actually one of the biggest pad spikes you're actually going to experience on the Delhi side. So a lot more players leaning into it, and I expect to see that here on the Altai map, even though it's not the most desirable map for a Delhi spammer. But yeah, you may notice Viper has been playing a lot of Delhi at the moment, by the way. We did see him recently in the 3v3 Gamer Legion game. If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. That was a fun little charity game between all the Gamer Legion members. He played Delhi in that one. We've been kind of casting a few of his different Delhi games. He's definitely been trying to crack it, right? Trying to evolve it. We've even seen him stomp some of the experts on the Delhi side, right? The people that are just non-stop spamming them with several hundred games already under their belt on this one Civ. So clearly has the right idea about the Civ, clearly has a good understanding of it. And on the other side, the Muslim has been experimenting a lot, right? The reason he dropped down to 70, 80 on the leaderboards, what we mentioned earlier, was because of the experimentation. He's been trying a lot of new different things. He's trying to think outside the box because this guy hasn't got anything to prove, right? The Muslim already proved that he is one banger of a player in AoE4. You have to remember that in the recent tournament, he came out on top, right? Yeah, he took first place in the SteelSeries Prime Cup, which made him a pretty penny, $5,000 from winning that one. So he's pretty cozy. It's kind of crazy, actually, because I think the Muslim... I'm going to double check this because the thing that's crazy to think about here, the Muslim, if we look him up and look at his earnings from StarCraft, yeah, his earnings from StarCraft was $37,000. $37,253 to be specific, right? But he played in StarCraft for several years, right? So he began in 2010, and then I think his final kick at it was around 2019. That's when he just fell back full-time as a content creator. So I find that quite entertaining. Quite amusing, in fact, because when you think about it, in just like 2 months, he's earned a sixth, basically, of what he did in several years in the StarCraft community. I mean, maybe that just speaks volumes to him, or maybe it just speaks to the growth of esports, right? There's definitely a lot of more money around in the scenes these days compared to back in those years. Back when we were getting started and still young and whippersnappers, right? But at the same time, you know, it's just a case of I think he's learned a lot as a player. He understands the games on a high level. Will we still see the Muslim at the top of the leaderboards in 2 months, 4 more months, you know, 10 months, a year, 2 years? That's a question mark. We're gonna have to see proof because I think he is a very talented player, but you have to wonder as time develops. You have people that are, like I call them the initial starters, right? They're the naturals, actually, natural talenters, right? We've all had that friend who you introduce a game to, he picks it up and he instantly kicks your ass, right? The Muslim is he's got the experience to do that right now. The question is whether you're going to have that hardcore grinder that comes out of nowhere, and once he's kind of equal to Muslim's hours, is he just going to be naturally better because he's younger, he's got a new twist on the game? Because there is something to be said about the strengths and weaknesses of bringing experience from previous games. Just like in any avenue of life, right? The whole concept is innovation is the way to perfection, even though perfection is never truly, you know, achievable. It gets you closer. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you think about a lot of these different jobs you'll experience in life and these different careers you'll hear about and these different things people do, new people come in and their ideas usually tend to transcend what became before, right? They evolve it in a whole new way. You see this when you have big tournaments like, for example, Dota 2's TI this year got won by a bunch of first-timers, very young kids, right? Instead of the veterans. Because they brought new ideas and new concepts to a stagnant meta, right? And that's what you get when you bring in these fresh bloods. Whereas when games first start up and things haven't been kind of figured out to that same degree, having that veterancy, having that experience that people like Viper and TheViper's do, actually can propel you forward and stick you at the top of the game for quite a while until those trailblazers show up when everything becomes stagnant. Because TheViper's will have learned things over the years, right? There's experiences he's had from StarCraft and other games that he's going to come and apply here. But you might find that in a year's time, a nobody is going to come out of nowhere, win the biggest event of the year for Age of Empires 4 because he looked at the game a completely different way. And that's kind of an exciting thought to kind of process as we move in and the months continue through past the release of Age of Empires 4. But after that nice kind of thought process, because I do think that's an exciting thing to think about, we've got plenty to talk about now. As we can see, this got quite exciting while we were talking. You can already see that there's no priority for professional scouts coming out of Viper. He's just moved a mill across, as we usually see a player do on Altai if they aren't going to engage with scouts. And he has been getting those gathering rates quickly, so he's exploiting the DA right now. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Muslim, another Sith unlikely to build into scouts, done this. He dropped a secondary TC, condensed and very defensive. That, by the way, is an interesting detail in itself because Delhi players typically don't do this. Sorry, Delhi. Well, Delhi and Abyssins. They both don't tend to aggress early, especially Delhi. So the fact that he was this paranoid that he kept it condensed, I think this speaks more to the layout of Altai than it does to the Muslim's concerns about his opponent's aggression, right? So that's why the TC is so close together with the primary. But already, the Muslim is getting aggressive. We can see him just pushing out these horsemen, as many as possible. And he already scouted out that his opponent did go for archers. Because there's 1 or 2 moves, right, available to Delhi. You're either going to go for archers or you're going to go for spearmen in most games. I don't really see a world in which he would have default went stables. Because you don't anticipate that a Delhi player is going to go for pro scouts. And horseman is more built as a counter to something you've seen elsewhere. By the way, the reason you don't really see Delhi players going for pro scouts is because it's just a fixed time, right? It's the 2-minute 10 compared on the other side, 1-minute 15. So if you were racing towards pro scouts, and this is, by the way, another reason why a lot of people have felt Delhi are underwhelming. If you're racing towards pro scouts, not only have you got that issue of like, oh, I mean, I don't get stables earlier on than other people, so I have to wait until feudal to do it. It's the moment that once you crack feudal, you have to wait an additional minute over other players. And that extra minute is another cycling of picking up deer carcasses for your opponent. And that's why we do not see Delhi ever engage with pro scouts. The Muslim just kind of rousing his opponent, rallying him around in the meantime, is scaling up. They're going to have very similar timings ready to crack into the castle age. And I don't expect to see any deviation from the Muslim. It's probably just going to be the culture wing. Meanwhile, for Viper, I am expecting that compounder defender. This game is not going to last long enough, I don't think, for House of Learning. I don't really think any games tend to, in a 1v1 setting, last long enough for House of Learning. Because remember that Home Blades, by default, is up at over 15 minutes. So there it is. Compounder defender at the back. Meanwhile, the Muslim already building into the culture wing. For those wondering why you get the culture wing, it's just given the options at the beginning, unless you're going to build into camels, there's no point in military wing, and nobody builds into camels who wants to win his Abyssids. And you're not going to do trade. unless you're actually doing trade, right? It becomes a pointless wing. So that just by default leaves you a culture wing where you at least get the benefits of reducing the cost of technology, even if the second tier of healing with keeps is pretty worthless for most of the game. Kind of interesting thought, actually. There's a lot of passive healing capabilities out of both of these civs, right? You have to remember that the Delhi do have access to unique research that lets them heal around the mosques, any nearby units. And then, of course, as we were saying with the research over here, the medical centers, you can see you heal every nearby unit to a keep 2 every 1 second. So it's kind of a funky detail. I don't think we're going to see it at all in this game, but it's kind of a cute thought in this matchup specifically. So far, the Muslim... Did he loot? Yeah, he lost the forces. So Viper was able to push him back. Tech up is going to be successful for Viper first. Remember, the Muslim has no control over this. He can't invest workers to speed up the rate at which he techs up. He's stuck a fixed rate of 2 minutes per tech up. But he's already getting the infrastructure in place. Going up to 4 racks. Meanwhile, on the other side, we're actually seeing a diversification Viper. He does have the stable. He's got his hands on a racks, and he's got the archery range. I do believe this is going to be elephant spamming soon. He's just waiting for the initial influx of resources required to do so. Even has a market down here to ensure he can get to it if, a little bit quicker if need be. And I think he is already out. Yeah, he's doing this again. All right, this is what we always see. Delhi plays. It's the wall crawl. Viper is going to win a tournament with this at this rate. The guy is getting it on lock. It is incredibly strong and incredibly underrated. Do I think it's absolute top tier? Top 3 in the game right now? No, obviously not. I think Mongols, Rus, they still are incredibly potent, even the Chinese. I think a lot of people just got bored with Chinese. They feel like they've cracked the code. What he's doing here is he's prepping the late series scenario, right? If you're in a best of 7, for example, you need to win 4 games. Being good at the top 3, the broken 3, isn't good enough. You need someone to fall back upon. And if you can actually master Delhi, I think is easily in the mid of the pack right now, maybe leaning towards the higher side. I think HRE, a little bit more situational than Delhi, in fact. Delhi, of course, the only limitations can be sometimes with these sacred sites being wonky to defend, as we talked about before, and that might end up being the case on this type of map. And he's trying to fix it now with the Palisades. I expect this to be Palisades followed up by stone walls behind it. And for the meantime, he's just putting these further forward to kind of secure the relics and get some initial defenses in place. But the Muslim, now on the clock. 10 minutes to work with. He needs to find a way to push back. And this could get a little bit wonky because, as we've seen, a lot of players have struggled to penetrate the lines, right? And if you let your opponent for free put up this many static wall placements with the towers at the beginning, you're putting yourself at a sheer disadvantage. But we do already see the Muslims starting to build into the Rams. Remember, this is one nice thing you do have as the Abbasids, the ability to build out in the field, and you have it by default, and you also get access to Springolds and Mangonels. These will not help him, though. If he wants to really get through this, he might need Trebs, and that's wonky, because that means you have to spend 300 wood and then spend a huge surplus of wood and gold on putting out a few trebuchets. So we'll see if he can just make it work with battering rams in the meantime. And Viper not really going too hard into the archers, saving up everything he can. Tower War Elephants coming out. And it's kind of crazy to think that, you know, everyone was complaining about how broken the Delhi were. Sanctity got nerfed. Then the Delhi players were complaining, oh, we have no trick anymore. Our game is totally ruined. And then some smart cookie at some point sat there and went, actually, our game isn't ruined at all. We just have a 5 or 10 minute later timing, and it's even stronger. And that's what we're seeing right now, because now he's at a stage where he has static defenses in place, he has control of the sacred sites, and he has war elephants out. And that's going to be a problem for the Muslim. Muslim, trying to build more of these Mangonels. Another thing to highlight, by the way, in this matchup, remember before, Springle crawling was annoying, right? Abbasids were one of the civs that could do that, and it could really screw up the elephants. But remember, they nerfed the damage on Springles now, so it's not really a viable option up against the war elephants. And that's why Delhi also feels a bit more dominant now compared to before. Their counters have been kind of nullified to a certain extent. But look at the damage coming out from the man-arms right now. The war elephant's already almost gone. Wow, he flopped quick. The Muslim runs him over in the blink of an eye, and he's already onto the second war elephant here. Baron Rams, in the meantime, making its way through the Stonewall Towers, and it looks like this trade is going to be ridiculously valuable for the Muslim. Second war elephant down. A proper war elephant coming in now. Remember, these ones have more health, 1400, and it makes sense. You don't really need tower war elephants up against man-at-arms. They have too much armor for you to find insane value out of the archers on top. You'd rather have the extra health and the extra little bit of damage to work with. the meantime, just throwing a few torches out of the battering ram, trying to get through it. But I think the battering ram might be able to get through the Stonewall Tower first at this rate. Meanwhile, the War Elephant almost down to half HP. No Spearman coming out yet, and finally the switchover's there. TheMuslim, this is a fantastic switchover. Remember, the Abysses, they get access to the Phalanx research, right? So he's got that additional range. You can see it. His tower range, 0.59. It means they can stab over each other. It means you can get double the amount of units hitting to these elephants. And in the blink of the eyes, it's already gone. And control the Sacred Site along with it. Viper, I mean, he was trying those cheeky moves on the sides. He's at least still getting good gold crawl, right? He's getting gold treacle here with the outer Sacred Sites. Not like to be decapped, but he's lost his win condition on the center. And he's losing control quickly. That's why he's trying to drop this keep. Moving a lot of people out to build it. It should be successful, but he might lose more elephants in the meantime. Mangonels looking for the value shots, and they're going to find it. Splash onto both of the elephants. War Elephant almost dead is going to fall. And well, the secondary elephant is going to be far behind it. 5 Spearmen, 3 Man-at-Arms, and that should be enough to kill off this 1400 HP elephant. Even the Scholar almost dead now. Will be finished off, so no more cheeky healing shenanigans coming out. And these trades are bad right now. Viper, if we had an effective economy sink in this battle, right now, TheMuslim has spent like half the resources, right? Like, you could say they maybe spent an equal amount, but in terms of losses, it's half. It's less than half right now because of how many of these elephants keep flopping alongside all the towers that keep falling. Meanwhile, on the flank, just one or two cheeky spears moving in. TheMuslim, this is a really cool move, by the way. Not enough players try this when they understand the matchup. He risks pushing his economy out here to gather off these deer, because remember, you gather from deer quicker. The reason you get away with this against the Delhi is everything they do is slow, right? Elephants and man-at-arms, you know, spearmen, like anything they're thinking of building isn't going to run you down. You're not worried about being up against a cavalry civ here, because their cavalry is morbidly obese, right? It might say cavalry, but when it moves at 1 tile a second, or in the case of the Tower Elephant, 0.88 tiles a second, it doesn't really feel like cavalry. In the end, they will get rid of that Spearman. He'll continue gathering. TheMuslim now up at 81 compared to the 42 of Viper. Viper is not scaling anymore, and now TheMuslim moving towards his opponent's base. And that's the other detail, right? The secondary TC also enables you to push out into these eco pockets. And it has no risk to it because of the aforementioned lack of mobility on Delhi, in conjunction with the fact that you can so quickly replace that which you'd lose. Here we go, moving in. Could build some battering rams here. TheMuslim, I think he's capped on wood right now, so unlikely to do so just yet. I like that he's prioritizing the moss straight away, slowing down any additional researchers coming out in conjunction with removing that 200 gold trickle from his opponent's base. It won't take him long to get through more of these buildings, but now he'll fall back to start building 1 or 2 battering rams, finishes off the scholars in the meantime. And the army, look at the immobility. Viper, it takes him so long to move across here. And more troops trickling in the meantime. I don't know if this is going to be enough elephants. I really feel like this is not going to be enough elephants. It's definitely going to be hard. I like the preemptive Springwood out TheMuslim as well, right? He doesn't have full vision of the base. He doesn't know if his opponent is building into siege. We can see there's no siege coming out for Viper. And once he keeps pushing in and there's no sort of strike at these siege weapons, he's going to feel very confident about his position in this game. Now up to Vet Spearman. Remember how quickly the elephants were falling before to the Normie Spearman, the hardened Spearman. Now these ones have been teched up, juiced up further on the damage. Now 34 per stab into these elephants. And it looks like this Tower Elephant's not going to come out in time. Archer range is almost finished. They're not prioritizing it right now, though. They need to hurry up. He left it to be on fire, so an elephant is going to come out here. So that's an advantage for Viper gained. One that he shouldn't have had there. TheMuslim being a little bit greedy, prioritizing the TC instead of finishing off the archery range. You should know up against a Delhi player, it's going to be elephants coming out of this building. But he doesn't seem phased. He just continues to mass Mangonels. And it's a problem right now because, yes, you're getting more elephants, but that means you're getting more clump, right? It means that the Mangonel is going to get more inherent value. And that's a scary situation to be in. Charge towards the Mangonels. TheMuslim going to back them away. I believe, no, he didn't get the movement speed, but it doesn't seem to really matter here. Engagement in the main line. And look at the health of the War Elephant. It's almost dead already. That's 1400 HP. I'll remind you, folks, that's more than the average elephant. Usually we see the Tower Elephants, and these ones are making no difference to the battle. Viper is just plowed through by the spear power of Abyssids. And guys, I know I talked about Delhi as maybe a counter on certain maps to these rush-type civs, people like the Roos especially who don't like dealing with static defenses. But you know what? I am really convinced right now the ultimate counter to Delhi is Abyssids. Abbasids play into Delhi so damn well. With the siege crawl, with the spears to counter out all the quality units in these elephants, as well as matching them on the man-at-arms front, it feels now impossible to deal with the Abbasids if you're playing as the Delhi Sultanate. And we're seeing that right here. The army's been wiped, the TC soon to fall. The Muslim ain't gonna wait around on this one. He smells blood in the water, and like a shark, he will strike. And meanwhile, the center Viper is still trying to build up infrastructure under the safety of the keep. The keep that was meant to protect the sacred site, but the sacred site was just irrelevant in the end. And yep, you know he's got a secondary base, but why not burn the primary? The primary that has both of the landmarks remaining standing in it. You get rid of them, you get him out of the game for good. I mean, this is just beautiful to see. I want to see Abbasid find some relevance, right? I was sick and tired of Abbasid just being a worthless trash sieve in a lot of people's eyes. And I do think that they still have a lot of weaknesses. Their camels are absolute dog water. It's just not even worth grabbing them. Maybe one for the aura, but then that can be sniped out by a smart player to stop invalidating his cavalry. But in general, honestly, Spearman good. Spearman very good. That phalanx factor cannot be underrated against cavalry type lines, especially against the elephants, right? The elephants are these big beefcakes that are like, there's only so many units able to get around me. Well, yeah, but you have to double that number for the Abbasids, and it really does make the difference here. Really great showing out the Muslim. Easy cruising to the victory, and I think Viper is going to be all but done when he sees all these battering rams coming in again. His one hope was to recap the sacred site, maybe try and crawl out a victory, force pressure away from his primary base, but failing to do so, the Muslim will take the game here in the Altai map, in the Delhi versus Abbasid matchup. And Abbasids, well, they're starting to look a little bit spicy.